Dumbo. It was spring in the circus. Everyone was singing, everyone was happy. Happiest of all was Mrs. Jumbo, for in her stall in the circus train was a chubby, brand new baby elephant, though the other animals called the baby Dumbo. His mother loved him dearly, even though his ears were kind of big. "All aboard!" shouted the ringmaster. After a long winter's rest, it was time to set out again on the open road. "Toot toot!" whistled Casey Jones, the locomotive of the circus train. With a jiggity jerk and a brisk puff puff, off sped Casey Jones. It was dark when Casey Jones whistled and puffed into the station. Rain poured down hard, but the circus began to unload. The workmen jumped down from their freight cars. They lighted torches and stuck them in the ground. Men and animals came bustling out of the train into the windy, wet night. They all helped to get the circus tent up, even Mrs. Jumbo's new little baby. By morning, the rain had stopped. The tent was all set, and the circus was busy getting ready for the big parade. The band played, everyone fell in line. Then off pranced the gay procession down the main street. There were creamy white horses, licorice-colored seals. There were lady acrobats in pink silk tights, lions pacing in their gilded wagon cages, elephants marching with slow, even steps. The crowds on the sidewalk cheered, and then suddenly their eyes opened wide. They craned their necks. "Look, look," they cried. "Look at that silly animal with the draggy ears. He can't be an elephant. He must be a clown." They burst out into loud laughs. Sadly, Dumbo toddled behind his mother with his trunk clasped to her tail. He tried to hurry along faster so he couldn't hear all their laughter, but he stumbled. He tripped over his ears. Down he splashed into a puddle of mud. Now the crowd laughed even harder. Mrs. Jumbo scowled at them. She picked Dumbo up. She carried him in her trunk the rest of the way. When the parade finally came back to the tent, Mrs. Jumbo took Dumbo in her wooden bathtub and washed him all up, and she whispered comforting words to her little one. A gang of noisy boys came pushing their way into the tent. "We want to see the elephant," they all yelled. "You know, the one with the sailboat ears. Look, there he is." A boy grabbed one of Dumbo's ears and pulled it hard. Then he made an ugly face and stuck out his tongue. Mrs. Jumbo couldn't stand it. She snatched the boy up in her trunk, she dropped him across the road, and she spanked him. "Help, help," cried the boy. "What is going on here?" said the ringmaster, and he snapped his whip at Mrs. Jumbo. "Tie her down," he said. Mrs. Jumbo reared on her back hind legs, but soon she was behind bars in the prison wagon with a big sign that said, "Danger, mad elephant, keep out." The next day, they made Dumbo into a clown. They painted his face with a foolish grin and dressed him in a baby dress. On his head, they put a bonnet, and they used him in the most ridiculous act in the show. They made him in a make-believe fire. He had to jump from the top of a blazing cardboard house down into a fireman's net. The audience thought it was a great joke, but Dumbo felt disgraced. "He's a disgrace to us," said the other big animals. Hidden in a pile of hay was little Timothy Mouse, the smallest animal in the whole circus. "They can't treat that fellow that way," said Timothy Mouse. "Not while Timothy Mouse is around." "Hey, little fellow," he called over to Dumbo. "Don't be afraid. I'm your friend. I want to help you. Say," he went on, "those ears are really good as wings. I bet I could help you how to fly." Quietly, Dumbo and Timothy crept out of the tent to go see Mother Jumbo. Dumbo told her all about the clown act and how unhappy he was without her, and how the wonderful idea that Timothy had about taking him into a success. Then sadly, they had to say goodnight, and Timothy and Dumbo continued on their way. With Timothy as teacher, Dumbo practiced running and jumping and hopping. He tried slow and fast takeoffs, standing and running jumps. He stretched out his wings and flapped 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he tried the whole thing together again. But hard as he tried, Dumbo could not leave the ground. At last, almost too tired to stand, the two friends gave up and started gloomily heading back to the sleeping circus. "Don't worry, Dumbo," said Timothy, as he curled up on Dumbo's hat brim for the good night's sleep. "We'll have you flying yet." When the morning sun arose, Timothy was the first to wake up. He blinked and looked up, and just above him were 4 black crows. Why, where am I?" yawned Timothy. "Where am I?" "You're up in our tree," snapped the crows crossly. "That's where you are." Tree? Gasped Timothy. He looked around. Sure enough, there he was, sitting on a branch. He and Dumbo were up in a tree. The ground was far, far below, but how did we get up here? How? Cackled the crows. You and that elephant just came flying on up here. Flying? Said Timothy. Dumbo, we did it. We flew. You flew us into this tree. Slowly, Dumbo opened up his eyes. He glanced down. He gulped. Then he struggled to his feet, but suddenly he slipped, and the smooth tree bark fell down, 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 down. Timothy was clinging to his trunk, and plop, they landed in a shallow pond underneath the tree, and the crows chuckled and laughed from above. Timothy scrawled up out of the water and wrung out Dumbo's tail. Dumbo, he panted, you can fly. If you can fly when you're asleep, you can fly when you're awake. Your ears, Dumbo. They're your fortune. He grabbed one of Dumbo's wet ears and patted it. You won't be a clown anymore. You'll be famous. You'll be the only flying circus in the whole wide world. And Timothy and Dumbo began all over again to try to practice flying. But it wasn't easy. Time after time, Dumbo tried to take off, and time after time, he ended up sprawled out flat on the floor. Soon the crows began to feel sorry for the little fellow. And then Timothy told them all the sad things that had happened. One of the crows took Timothy aside and said, "Flying is like swimming," he answered. "It's just a matter of believing that you can do it." He turned and snatched the long black feather out of his tail. "Here, take this. Tell that baby elephant it's a magic feather. Tell him if he holds on to it, he can fly." And the crows winked and flew off. Timothy handed Dumbo the feather and scurried up his big trunk to the brim of his cap, and he held his breath. The trick worked like a charm. The very instant that Dumbo wrapped the tip of his trunk around that feather, flap, flap, flap went his ears. Up into the air he soared like a bird. Over the tallest treetops he sailed. He glided, he dipped, he dived. 3 times he circled around the heads of the cheering crows. And then they decided to head back to the circus grounds. Timothy shouted, "We must keep your flying a secret. A surprise for your act in the afternoon show." No one noticed Dumbo when he and Timothy came quietly back. It was already time for Dumbo to get ready for his costume. Inside the walls of the cardboard house, he had to wait until the fire crackled around him. At last, Timothy leaned down and handed him the feather. Crack, crack, crackled the fire. The clown act was on. Flames shot up around the cardboard house. Clang, clang, roared the clown fire engine rushing to the blaze. From the far end of the ring, a red-headed mother clown came running by. "Save my baby," she said. "He's on the top floor." The fireman brought a big net and held it out. "Jump, my darling baby, jump," shrieked the mother clown. Dumbo jumped, but as he jumped, the black feather slipped out of his trunk and floated down. Now his magic was gone, so Dumbo started to plunge down like a stone. Timothy saw the feather go. "The fat feather was a fake," he shouted. "You can still fly, Dumbo, you can still fly." Dumbo heard the shout but undoubtedly spread his ears wide. Not 2 feet above the net, he stopped the plunge and swooped into the air. A mighty gasp arose from the audience. They knew it couldn't be, but it was. Dumbo was flying. While the crowd cheered with delight, Dumbo did power dives, he did loop-de-loops, he did barrel rolls. He swooped down to pick up peanuts and squirted them back at the clowns. The keepers freed Mrs. Jumbo and brought her to the tent in triumph to see her baby flying. So all of Dumbo's worries came to an end. By evening, Dumbo was a hero from coast to coast. Timothy became his manager and saw to it that Dumbo signed a wonderful contract with a big salary and a pension for his mother. The circus was renamed Dumbo's Flying Circus. And Dumbo traveled in a special streamlined car, but best of all, he forgave everyone who had ever been unkind to him, for his heart was just as big as his ears.